got some birds outside, so sorry about that. We're going to talk about defining a budget. So, if you're in an academic environment and you're being sort of paid a salary to do this and you have access to multiple professions, then um, the average budget for the project is going to be a bit easier to put together because you might not have to make as many compromises, possibly. But what I can do is give you some average costs for what things are going to cost in terms of development time, artwork expenses, and like the manufacturing and shipping of that product if you're doing around 1,000 copies. We could also talk about 100 copies. There'll be a video later during the manufacturing core. There's a note in there about doing 100 copies. But around about 1,000 copies is where you start getting those really good economies of scale. And you start noticing some really quite sharp decreases in cost, even if your game gets huge and has lots of components. In terms of average costs, I've got some props to show you. So games like these are around 54 to 72 cards. These cost around $3,500 US, including shipping to a warehouse or to your home or to your institution or wherever. So that includes plastic wrap and the boxes, but doesn't necessarily include a rule book. This one does, but that's around about the budget that you're going to need for manufacturing. In terms of artwork, this was a collaboration, so the artwork is paid as a royalty afterwards to the artist, based on sales revenue. And for this one, for QT, we made an arrangement with the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority, which is headquartered in Townsville, Australia, at the James Cook University, to use actual images from the Great Barrier Reef that they had taken to fill out the cards. So this game is designed to be a non-profit, so that substantially reduced the cost of sort of licensing images and things like that. I could have used iconography and things like that, but we'll get into sort of ways to trim costs and budget a little later. But generally, for artwork, you're looking at about $100 per card. So if we had done all of the artwork and stuff, like licensing and stuff like that, whether it's illustrations or licensing for a commercial product, around about, this is Australian, 100, so that would have been around about $5,000 for 54 cards. But it all depends on how you design it, and I'll go into that later. Next up, we have a game that is about 108 cards, so that's pretty substantial. There's like a rule book, and this would cost about $7,000 and shipping included. So this is actually this is not a big game, but if you're getting into one where you've got lots of cards, that's been my experience. And you'll notice that is about double the cost of just a simple 54 card deck. So it's literally double the cost because we're not hitting that sort of scale just yet, where you get massive discounts. But it's still relatively cheap. That's about $7 per copy, including shipping. So pretty good. This game is 216 cards or 204 cards. Look, it's a lot of cards. But anyway, and it'll come with like a hinge box and linen finish and all these little kind of extras. That costs about $8,500 US, shipping included. So, one thing to keep in mind, obviously, is that as your games get bigger and more complex, they get heavier. So the shipping is a bit more than that. So that's just one thing that's going on there. The manufacturing is only about half of that. So you might need to absorb some costs, which is what's happening with that game in terms of the funding. But that's around about. It's only $1,500 increase though over a game half the size. So we've gone from 54 being about 3,500 to 7,000. To 7,000 for something that's twice the size, literally twice. But now we're getting into something that's about 4 times the size of that initial little pack of cards, but it's only maybe two and a half times the cost. Look, I'm not that amazing at maths. I should be because I'm working in a data science unit, but hey, I make the games. Okay, so we're starting to hit that point where cost per copy is, for what you get, is going down. Or sorry, not going down. You get more out of the money. Next up is something where you go to a big box game. So this is your more standard kind of board games. So like Monopoly or Catan or there's a whole bunch of them. This has a lot of stuff. So we've got like character cards in little packs. We've got objective cards. They're all different sizes. There's about 24 of each of those. So we're already up to something like 70-ish cards. Got little hexagon pieces, a bunch of tokens, little rattly things, dice, a bunch of standees. This is pretty crazy. Right? Stickers. This would also have this game would also have a bunch of rule books, like A4 glossy print full color rule books. And so you might start thinking, well, I mean, heck, if one deck is worth 3,500, like what's this going to be? It's going to be heaps and heaps and heaps. No, actually, what you are going to find is that doing a full run of 1,000 of these will maybe be about between $16,500 US dollars and $20,500 US dollars for a really big game. So that's what's happening. So once you start breaking into that over 10,000 mark, the amount that you're paying for each individual component is going down. So this box still costs about $16 to $20 per unit to produce, but obviously you sell it for correspondingly more eventually. But yes, so there isn't like necessarily a maximum cap, and that doesn't include things like plastic miniatures or certain other features of games or custom spinners or anything like that. But those are the basic parameters that you're going to be working in terms of scale of card game. And of course you can also negotiate custom deals with different manufacturers. So these are the prices that we paid for Virtual Reef Diver, and also for games through Half Monster Games, because working with a factory we really like, they're really prompt, they're really quick, so they fix errors for free and that kind of thing. So yeah, so we're getting a deal. Might not be the absolute most cost-effective deal, but that's the ballpark that you might be playing in, that much or less it should be. Next up, so that's the manufacturing side of things. So it's going to be a few $1,000s. Depending on the scale of your game. That's why I'd recommend starting small. But if you're doing a crowdfunding campaign, that manufacturing cost to me paid off completely. And if we're talking about institutions, institutions generally have somewhat higher sort of budgetary limits for different projects. So that's something to just keep in mind. You can always just ask. Of course. Now, the next thing to take into account is, so you got your manufacturing, and then probably the equal half of that is the development. So development is artwork, design time, prototyping expenses, and the cost of manufacturer-grade samples and shipping. So the more you can do yourself, and the simpler the art style, the more cost-effective it's going to be. Really. Or not cost-effective, because you might not get quite as much out of it, but yes, so in terms of artwork, if you are paying up front for different cards and graphic elements and things like that, as I said, it's about $100 per card, but depending on the artwork style and the volume, and if you do it all as one hit with an artist, you can get that down to, it's like 50 or 20, or it just depends on individual arrangements. I find that, yes, like the simpler the art style, the more cost effective it is, and you can also make custom arrangements with like the Marine Park Authority to try and work with them towards unified goals, and that can really help in that respect. In terms of design time, you can go with the minimum wage, or you can go with your own wage or something like that. But I would say a game of about this complexity might take about 50 hours. That includes playtesting and things like that, like minimum, or not minimum, but it shouldn't take more than 50 hours to get that much. A game this complexity might be 60 because it takes a bit more sort of artwork and graphic time. Something like this with like a million different bits and pieces, that was easily 100 or more. And it really depends. And of course, if you're using a design or basing your design off of another game that you think is cool and you're drawing inspiration from that, that can speed things up as well. So the development is the trickiest part to try and budget out, but I would say at least think about, if you have to put it down on paper somewhere, at least as much into the design and development as there would be into the manufacturing. So that's sort of very basic rules of thumb, but yes, that's what I'd recommend. So the other thing is, in terms of prototyping expenses, I'm gonna have a number of videos about how to do basic prototypes and get as much iterative prototyping done as you can to reduce those costs, and then we'll go into advanced prototyping, which is a pretty fun topic. And then so those costs can be shouldn't be more than $500, really, if you're making something towards the lower end of the scale. Okay, and if you're at an institution, you can use a printing allowance and stuff like that, so that won't necessarily come out of that budget. And then in terms of manufacturer grade samples, so that's where you get one of these. So that is a manufacturing sample. It looks pretty much indistinguishable. They cost around about, I'm just going to go through the different sizes of things, about 200 US from a manufacturer, and the shipping, they have to print it and custom assemble it, and it's a whole big deal. That is if you're using a manufacturer. So I will also link a couple of sites, so the Game Crafter and Boardgames Maker. So they both do much less expensive individual copies of games, but that won't be it's still a really good idea to get your manufacturer to send you a copy of a sample, because you can't be guaranteed that it's going to look how you want it to look when it comes out. So yes, that's $200 for something of that scale. I think this is about 250 US. It's a bit bigger, a bit more complicated. This bad boy, because there's so many cards, was about, so no dice or anything, was about 400, or will be about 400. And that includes shipping cost as well. And then something like this was going to be around 750 US, because it's a lot to put together. But again, in size comparison, like 3 times the cost, but you get something like 10 times the game. So those are the general budgeting considerations that you'll need to do, and very general sort of parameters that you might be playing in. So again, there's lots of custom deals you can make, but that's what I'd recommend. The template for this node is going to be a little like budgeting, kind of just breaking down into, it'll be one pager. What are your estimated costs for each thing? Whether you have to pay them now or later, there'll be a column for that. And so you can look at sort of the expense flow across the entire project. So hope this helps. Next up is going to be defining budget. Now you've defined your budget, is how you choose your mechanics based on how much money you have, and the knowledge and identification of mechanics you did prior. Did I say budget? Yeah, and budget. So the combination of ideas and budget is where your game will actually come out. So talk to you soon.